I'm gonna start this video off by saying I don't really have any issue with Death Battle. I think that they make decent calcs and they have fine scaling, but from the battles I've watched they have a tendency to wildly lowball or upscale characters seemingly depending on their popularity. Like with All Might vs Might Guy, pitting All Might, the at most island level fodder, against Might Guy who can be argued multi-continental at a low ball. I've even seen scaling in the planetary ranges pre-8th gate. Most all their Naruto videos are like this, like with Kakashi vs Obi-Wan, where they used blatant scaling that just literally doesn't apply to Obi-Wan, and they lowball Kakashi wildly. I found for this video they did something very similar to Obi-Wan vs Kakashi. It wasn't as bad for this video since a lot of the scaling they used is the kind used by the vast majority, and I didn't really expect any new or not as well known feats, but there still was quite a bit of lowballing and the apparent misconception that the breathing forms are real, which is blatantly wrong. They attempted to use the argument that breathing forms have been shown to manipulate their surroundings, so that contradicts the author's statement, but that's not really true, as this can just be attributed to shockwave manipulation or something like that, which isn't really that hard to picture since the speed of sound is achieved very early on in the verse, with fodder newly transformed demons performing subsonic feats and so on. Breathing forms not being real is pretty clearly portrayed. Even if you ignore the author's statement about water breathing, the only form that can be argued real is flame breathing if you use Rengoku Gaiden and view it as canon, and I know a lot of people don't. Regardless, all the forms are just fighting styles amplified by total concentration breathing or repetitive action. It's kind of weird so many people have this misconception when it's portrayed so blatantly so many times in the series. So it's not magic or anything. No characters are producing fucking insects or snakes or something. It's just a visual representation of their attacks, and the forms are designed to replicate their namesake. The visual effects are just to make sure the stuff isn't boring. Of course, blood demon arts actually do generate elements, and related to the forms there was the claim that Tanjiro's sun breathing takes a lot of stamina. This is quite wrong, as Tanjiro later in the manga can use it consistently for a very long period of time while poisoned and massively injured and so on. It's also implied that the 13th form uses more stamina than just the regular forms, so he was using a form of sun breathing that takes more stamina since it's repeating all of the other forms in a rapid succession. They did touch up on the similarities between breathing in real life used in martial arts compared to breathing in Demon Slayer, which is something that I've always found cool about the series, but apart from the fight in the death battle, that's pretty much the only thing I really enjoyed about this episode. As for most of the calcs and scaling, I'm not sure the reasoning they used to put the Doma feat at a mere 40 tons of TNT. I've done my own calc for the feat and I got around multi-city block, or around 100 tons, and I've seen others like the most popular one from Versus Battle Wiki that's around 80 tons of TNT even without kinetic energy. Along with their measurements and kg yield, which was shockingly low, but again, I don't really know how they were getting their result for that since they didn't show the calc, but oh well. They also claimed that if you apply kinetic energy to the Doma feat, it wouldn't be comparable to Jonathan's top tier feats, like the one from the Meteors, which from calcs I've seen isn't even above city level. In most cases it's in the ranges of town level, and it's really hard to actually gauge the feat anyway, because there's not really a specific time frame given. Either way, the statement that applying kinetic energy to the Doma feat makes it below town level is very wrong. For instance, here's a bit of a wank for the Doma feat. Well, it can actually be considered reasonable scaling depending on your perspective. I've used it a few times in debates and don't really have much issue with the actual scaling, as pretty much the only contentions come from like the speed to get the kinetic energy value. But to put it short, Inosuke and Kanao were unable to progress with their advance on Doma despite their ridiculously close range. This implies Doma was summoning the statue at such speeds that they would be unable to carry out their attack, and there are other things that imply the statue was summoned at a very rapid speed, like wood being thrown into the air, and just the setting of the panel, and obviously the thing I just mentioned, the first thing, which is the most major thing that implies it was summoned faster than Inosuke and Kanao's physical speed. This is important because at this point both scale ridiculously above the speed of lightning. With how common lightning speed feats are in Demon Slayer, I'll show some of them on screen right now. So even lowballing and using the speed of lightning and applying kinetic energy to this feat, it scales sort of near mountain level, but decently above city level, so quite decently above the meteor feat. Even without accounting for the Slayer mark, which is an arguable 100 times multiplier, but I'm not going to get into that. Even lowballing this feat massively and just applying like hypersonic or high hypersonic speed, it easily makes this feat in the city to town level ranges, and Tanjiro can be argued above Doma in base, especially weakened Doma, so it's quite easy to put Tanjiro at this level even without using the Doma feat. There are things like the Muzan feat where he makes an earthquake, which I've seen calcs like around the town level ranges, and there are things like Hantengu summoning his wood dragons fast enough to tag Nezuko. This is like a city level feat from calcs I've seen, and there are others, but those are the main ones. So it's not really hard to get Tanjiro to this point, especially when you consider that all of the feats I just provided scale below Tanjiro. Like the Muzan feat is from a suppressed Muzan, and Tanjiro didn't really have any issue with countering Muzan and landing hits on him and things like that. The Doma feat is from suppressed Doma, and, well, not suppressed, weakened Doma. You can argue this Doma was so weakened that this feat scales to literally any demon that can regenerate properly, since Doma couldn't regenerate properly. I saw someone argue that in a debate. I think it was Yurichi versus all of My Hero Academia. I don't really agree with this, but there's an argument to be made. You can argue none of the feats like the Doma and Hantengu feat, you can argue they wouldn't scale to Tanjiro's attack potency, which I disagree with, as Blood Demon arts are portrayed to be energy based, along with scaling below their user many times, like with Hantengu, people being able to cut up his clones and shoot his clones, despite them being unable to do the same with Hantengu's real body. Rui is another example of this. The only, counters to that argument are things like, the house demon, I forgot his name, but the demon Tanjiro faced who can manipulate the house, where Tanjiro says, he would be cut up into pieces, if he got hit with his sound claws, but, he pretty much one-shotted the demon. This isn't really a counter, because what Tanjiro said was purely speculation. He hadn't been hit with the claws, so he would have no way to tell, how strong they were, or how much damage they would do to him, so it was entirely speculation. The other one is the Doma feat, where, I'm pretty sure, Inosuke can't cut the Ice Buddha's head, but he can still cut Doma's head. That isn't really a contradiction for a few reasons, because it took a combined effort of Kanao and Inosuke to fully sever Doma's head, despite him being so massively weakened. And not to mention the fact that Doma's physical body was weakened. You can make the argument that his blood demon art wasn't weakened, but that's pretty weird to say since blood demon arts have a connection to their user's physical body and are directly related to it. But either way, cutting off Doma's head wasn't a singular feat, like it was done by both of them. And you can just argue that Doma was getting weaker as the battle progressed because of the poison, which is pretty clearly portrayed. So you would argue that, like, from the moment he summoned the statue, or from the moment he performed that city level feat, he was just getting consistently weaker. So when Inosuke and Kanao severed his head, he was just way weaker at that point. So it might not even scale to them. But that's debatable. Either way, neither one of those are direct contradictions to the argument that the Blood Demon arts scale to their user, or scale below their user. So either way, 40 tons of TNT is a ridiculous lowball for Tanjiro, and going specifically by the feat they produced for Jonathan would mean Tanjiro is leagues above him using the Doma feat and stuff similar to it, as I already went over. For speed, they also kind of ignored some of Tanjiro's higher tier scaling. An example is using lightning speed scaling for Tanjiro near the start of the manga and using the anime to support this. If you apply this scaling to the trio when they meet Tengen for the first time, and when Tengen blitzes all of them running across a road, this feat scales Tengen to sub-relativistic, which is something that obviously scales to all of the other Hashira pre-mark, which again is arguably a 100 times multiplier. Actually, Tengen, this actually scales to their to Tengen's movement speed. So like he would have sub-relativistic running speed rather than combat speed. His combat speed would be above that, and this is pre-Slayer Mark, as I said, pre-repetitive action, which is arguably like an amp of similar scale to total concentration breathing, or total concentration constant, which is a passive increase in stats. You can argue this is like an outlier or something. I disagree, because there's a lot of implication that Demon Slayer characters scale leagues above the lightning speed tier, and it's quite a lowball even for Entertainment District characters, but there's an argument to be made. Either way, lightning speed is a ridiculous lowball for Tanjiro. So while I don't doubt there's the potential for Jonathan to be faster, depending on what scaling you use, it's quite wrong to argue lightning speed is the best scaling for Tanjiro. Not to mention, with some of the feats they gave for Jonathan, there are major issues, like the laser scaling they provided. In hardly any instances the lasers are reacted to that actually get to faster than light, they scale to Jonathan. Like, it's heavily implied Joseph is way above Jonathan, so that line of scaling doesn't work. The main viable thing they used to support it was Dio using Jonathan's body to move at FTL speeds, thus Jonathan is FTL. Except this is quite wrong. The easiest argument against this is that Dio got an amp later on, so this doesn't scale to Jonathan. There is also the argument that Jonathan can manipulate Tanjiro's body. I don't really agree with this argument, since people like Tanjiro and the Hashira were able to withstand Muzan's blood attacks to an extent. These same attacks, which could completely deconstruct normal humans and turn them into like smoke, and completely vaporize them, leaving absolutely nothing left. So Tanjiro should have a resistance to these type of attacks. As for who I think wins with purely what they provided, I think Tanjiro wins because he's so far above Doma. Even in a prime state, he's so far above Doma. So yeah, I think Tanjiro wins with what they didn't provide. I think Tanjiro demolishes him. So, but at least the animated fight was cool.